This is Garry the Lion Killer Tonon, and you're watching Combat Insiders.
Hey everybody, welcome back, Combat Insiders. Joshua for Nick Portella. We're here via Skype. The Lion Killer, Garry Tonon.
What up?
Man, Garry, what's been going on, man?
Nothing crazy, just getting punched in the head and stuff, trying to learn how to not get punched in the head. Successful sometimes not so much, you know.
You know, me and record. Yeah. Speaking of that, me and Nick were going over some stuff, man, and we were, we usually have like a little brief meeting before we do interviews and how we want to introduce people and stuff like that. Your accolades are too long to list and to. I mean, I guess we could, but half the show would be your accolades. I mean, your jiu-jitsu record, your grappling record, your resume is.
Did you dig up anything about my nude speed chess competitions that I used to do?
I didn't see that one. I must have missed that one. I missed the speed chess.
Our championships there too.
Oh my God!
I missed the speed chess ones. We'll have to Google
nude
that.
Speed chess is very different.
Very different.
We were too busy reading IBJJF. Like, seriously, the list of what you haven't won is shorter.
Yeah, seriously. But, man, I guess real quick, for people who don't know you, which, shame on them, but for people who don't know you, man, I mean, I would be very interested in hearing, how did you get started, in the, the world of combat sports, jiu-jitsu, MMA, how did you really get into it?
So first, I was abandoned as a child in the jungle. No.
That sounds like a movie plot. I think you're making that up.
I like it.
So yeah, man. Honestly, I was raised by women for the most part, not wolves. And I saw my dad every once in a while, here and there, like on the weekends and stuff. But for the most part, it was like my mom and my sister. Like, I was watching like Gossip Girl and. What was the other one with, trying to think, those other two chicks. Doesn't make a difference. But basically, that was like what my upbringing was like, sitting down watching chick flicks with my mom and my sister. Yeah. So I didn't even know what jiu-jitsu or MMA or any of that stuff was. And I wasn't even allowed to do any, like, contact sports until my cousins did wrestling. Like, my mom has a bunch of family in Pittsburgh, and they all did wrestling. So my mom was comfortable with that because they had done it before, so she thought it was safe. And she let me start with that. And through wrestling, after a few years or so, I met a friend of mine who was involved in jiu-jitsu, and he was telling me about it. And he goes, yeah, man, I do this thing. It's a lot like wrestling, but like you strangle each other and you break each other's arms. And I was like, that doesn't sound real. I was like, that doesn't sound like something that people should be doing, And I was like, much less kids. We were like 14 at the time or something. And he's like, no, man, it's really cool. You should check out. I'm going to go to this competition this weekend. So he takes me to some like Naga competition. I think it was like one of the first couple Battle of the Beaches in Wildwood in New Jersey. And I was like, man, this is so cool. When I saw the jiu-jitsu, like, actually happening, because it was like wrestling, but like it was even cooler because you could choke people. So, but then convincing my mom to be on board with that was tough because, like I said, she didn't even want me doing contact sports. So, eventually, she worked at a children's hospital. So all she saw all day is like it was kids with special needs. So all she saw all day was like kids that had like been riding their bike and got like hit by a bus or a car or something and had like traumatic brain injuries and like were never the same again. So she was worried about everything. Every step that I took. So. Ultimately, eventually my friend's father convinced her that like it was safe enough and stuff, and she was still super on edge. I don't think it was something that my mother I don't think it sunk into my mom's head that like this is like what I was going to do for a living for a long time, man. Like even when I was like finishing up college and like as I was finishing up college, I had just won my second world championship without the gi. And even then, she's like, I think you should go to grad school for physical therapy and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah. I was like, I don't want to be another $20,000 in debt, when I'm probably just going to teach and compete anyway. So, but that's kind of a rough, story idea of how it all happened. I started at Tom DeBlass's school in Ocean County Jiu-Jitsu. and worked my way over to a bunch of different gyms, but ultimately settled down later on after after 5 years or so. I was like pretty much under Danaher. But it was like a year or two where I was kind of like all over the place, and then the last few years or so I've been with Danaher.
So it's always good when I get to see a New Jersey guy doing things. We got to stick together. People kind of like knock our state. So what's kind of wild is you've done it all. How did you – you were on the cover of Jiu-Jitsu magazine for your leg attacks. There's anything – everybody has their favorite. They specialize in this and that and the other thing. What about that part of it where you're like, this is going to be my thing? Because you're feared for that. You're feared for all of it, but that's your big –
Well, it was something – it's ironic because when I first started getting ready for ADCC, I had thought – and this is before I had really met – I had met John, but I wasn't like training under him specifically. I didn't really know that much about him. Frankie was going up to Henzo's every once in a while to take like classes with John on Mondays. So every so often I would go up on a Monday afternoon and I would take, because that was like when all the MMA fighters and professional guys like came down. So I would go with him and we'd go train, etc. So those are the only contact I had with John, like maybe like twice a month tops, something like that, right? So, but anyway, so I was pretty much training with Tom exclusively, and then I was thinking to myself as I was getting ready for my first ADCC, because I won trials and everything, I was thinking like, a big deficit that a lot of people have is like leg attacks. Because back then, nobody really did them. You'd see like Dean Lister and Paul Harris like attack people's legs and use heel hooks and stuff. But everybody else just thought it was like a taboo thing. Now, nobody around me really knew too much about it. But, some people had ideas. I would talk to Tom a little bit. He did a little bit of leg locks, and Dante Rivera helped me out initially, and I didn't quite have a full understanding of what was going on. I always had all these questions and stuff. But then I started going up to John more often, and I met Eddie Cummings, and I was training alongside him, and under John's teaching, and like he started to incorporate more and more of the leg lock game. Now Eddie had already made like a super heavy study of the leg lock game. And he wasn't as well rounded as me back then. But I would get in leg entanglement situations, and the dude would just submit me in like 2 seconds. And I'm like, what is this bullshit? I'm like, what's happening right now? So I'm like, all right, like this is where I need to be. Like these guys are going to show me, how to do it. Now I only had like 6 months or so to prepare for ADCC. I wasn't really, with them as like every day, like I am now. I wasn't able to get to New York every day. So, I don't know how much, leg lock understanding I had, but that was like in my head, I was like, oh, this is going to be my way to beat the competition because it's going to be different. It's going to approach the game a little differently than everybody else. Yeah. And, it didn't work out that ADCC. I ended up having like a really amazing match with Crone that everybody talks about, with the, an armbar escape, ended up taking his back. Then he took my back, submitted me, that whole ordeal. But anyway, out of all of that, I continued that study of leg locks and stuff with John, who had already been developing it for years, and just hadn't really had an opportunity to have any students that really showed it in competition. So then I continued to try to study that and make that one of the edges that I had over my competition. But ultimately, as I started to work with John, we took a more of a well-rounded approach and started working on everything. But leg locks was definitely like a thing that I saw that not a lot of people were doing, and I thought it would be like a good way to obtain success in a unique way.
And it worked.
Very much.
Yeah,
it has served well.
Victories for sure.
So specifically, and you've already kind of touched on it, but your transition from the jiu-jitsu world and the grappling world specifically into MMA. When did you decide that you wanted to cross over and go full-blown MMA?
So I had intentions of doing it for a while. My coach, Tom DeBlas, started doing mixed martial arts. I want to say somewhere around, I was like a purple belt or something in jiu-jitsu. And like I said, I didn't even know what MMA was until like I started training jiu-jitsu. I had never watched it. Like maybe I watched some boxing, but like I didn't even know jiu-jitsu existed, much less MMA.
Right.
So, when he started doing it, I started thinking to myself, like one day, because at that point in time, once I was past blue belt, I already been thinking to myself, like my career is going to be, I'm going to teach jiu-jitsu. Like, that's what I'm going to do for a living. I wasn't really back then you couldn't make money competing in jiu-jitsu anyway. So I was just like, all right, I'm going to teach for a living, right? So then when he started fighting, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I know guys are going to come to me as a teacher and be like, listen, like, I'm interested in doing MMA. And I didn't want to have to be like, yeah, I'm going to have to, you can train jiu-jitsu with me and I'll kind of show you some stuff and I'll have to point you this direction, right. Maybe get some MMA experience. Yeah. I wanted to be able to teach from a point of experience, like I wanted to get in there and know what it felt like to get punched and, how to use jiu-jitsu under those circumstances instead of just having a background of sport jiu-jitsu. And also, like, even if I was going to give somebody advice, it's like I didn't want somebody to come to me and me be like, oh, yeah, you should do this, this, and this. And I never really tried doing it before in a competitive setting. And then having it not worked out, some dude gets his face smashed for 3 rounds because I told him to do something, So right. I really just kind of, like, wanted to take it upon myself for multiple reasons. One is, like, a new challenge. Obviously, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for a really long time, and my main goal was, like, let me get really good at that first, and then I'll transfer into MMA. So that's what I was thinking. But ultimately, like, it was a new challenge, but I think as a whole, like, just kind of wanted to learn how to do it and have the experience so that one day as a teacher, I would be able to, tell people, what's up, hey, this works, this doesn't when you're getting hit in the face. Just because I think that's important. To be able to help out everybody that's going to come to me that needs help, in a realistic way and not just talking out of my ass,
Right. It was kind of crazy because you had submitted under the one flag. You had a jiu-jitsu match with Aoki in the cage, right? Yeah. And you beat him. And to me, that's I don't know. That's a lot of skill set in one cage for you two guys to be in there. So for whoever got out of there, the winner. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from him, but. You came out with the W. Now, for me, is it wild that your first pro fight in MMA was under 1? I know they're overseas, but the way I see it, they are on par with the UFC. It's the same thing. The talent is the same, and they're like powerhouses in my mind. That's why we're one of the few places that cover one.
Yeah.
So was it kind of wild? Like, okay, you didn't have your average pro debut.
There's a lot that goes into it, right? Like, so first of all, I went straight into pro without having any striking fights or matches of any kind, right? Like, right. I never did boxing, never did any kickboxing fights, no combat sambo, none of that stuff, right? So my only experience in combat sports was wrestling and jiu-jitsu competition, which right. None of those involve any striking whatsoever. So from that standpoint already, it's, a little bit of a shock just going into compete for the first time professionally without having any other fights, no amateur, no striking experience whatsoever, realistically. So that was a little bit crazy. But then, like, you take into account the fact that, like you said, they're an Asian organization. My very first fight is going to be, after I travel 20 hours on a plane right. and go to a country that I've never been in and, try to get acclimated to that for a week. And, while I'm doing this new sport that I don't even, have my bearings in. So there's a lot to it, man. I think that people are highly critical when it comes to, like, fans or whatever the case may be. And I understand, I get it. Like, I think I gave up on the idea that, like, I wasn't going to be criticized when I still saw, like, George St. Pierre's Instagram and he's, like, the greatest of all time. And, like, he still gets, like, shitstorms every time he fights.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, I know people are going to talk no matter what. But at the end of the day, what people do, like, I'm not trying to take anything away from mistakes that I make or anything like that in the cage. But people do have to realize that, like, man, like, even now, I've only literally had 5 fights. Or sorry, three fights. Right. I literally only had 3 fights. Like, that's it. That's all my total experience with mixed martial arts is all of my training, and which has been like about a year at this point, and 3 fights. And
it's just wild because most people start, you hit the regional scene, you do, 5-10 amateur fights, then you do pro. It's just crazy to think that you went in, and one is legit. I don't care what anybody says. They are the real deal. Their talent is awesome.
It's only getting worse out there, man. They just pulled in, DJ. They pulled in
Eddie Alvarez.
They pulled in what's his name? Why am I
Sage Northcutt.
Right? Yeah. Dude, I mean, it's just one after another, man. And you know, I didn't know that was even going to happen, you know, before I stepped in there. I had no idea they were just going to keep pulling these guys in. And, you know, I think it's just a testament to that organization. They're just getting more and more popular and bigger. And, you know, I only see more and more success, you know, going their way.
And now they're going to be here, television-wise. You know it's going to happen.
I didn't read the article about that. You know, I saw that they're working with TNT. And I know Chatri had mentioned to me a few times. He was like, yeah, you know, we're working something out. We might have a fight in America one of these days. But it all kind of seemed like one of those things that somebody tells you, you know, just to like make you happy. You know what I mean? Like, oh, yeah, one day you're going to fight in the U.S.
Right.
You know? Yeah. Like, it didn't seem like something that was going to happen anytime soon. But, you know, it seems like he's working his way there. So
I'll say, man, I was on a global conference call with him, and I remember some of the questions people were asking, listening to him. What I can say about him is when he says he's going to do something, he has yet to prove me wrong. I've heard him say a lot of things in the calls, and it's just wild. He does it. I hope you guys get here. I can't wait for you guys to get here so we could see a card here. I think it'd be the greatest thing ever.
That's definitely the big rumor. I mean, I was going to kind of segue into that. I mean, that's definitely a huge rumor right now is they're going to be over in the States, and like you said, the TNT, I think what they said, they've already picked up like 20-something shows or something like that. I think they're going to like rebroadcast as a way to, you know, that way a lot of the people here in the States can see, even though you could download the app, right? But I think it'll just get more eyeballs on you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, the more eyeballs on everybody. I think you guys contribute to the overall sport, you know. I've always said, like, you know, things like that, it's good for everybody. That competition, that the competition that you guys are going to bring, especially to the States, you know, you guys are going to compete more with, you know, your Bellators and your UFCs and stuff like that. It's good for the whole sport, right? Because competition breeds just it breeds people to be more competitive. That's kind of cliche, but you know, it makes people try harder, it makes people want to work for it more, and I think across the board, it's huge.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think that even in jiu-jitsu, it is super weird in jiu-jitsu because it's an even smaller sport, so which with even less money involved. So it confuses the hell out of me. But even in jiu-jitsu, man, like you see these guys and there's all these different competitions popping up, and like it's almost like they intentionally put them on the same day as like other jiu-jitsu competitions. I'm just thinking to myself,
oh sure,
they're just infighting and shit, and I'm just like thinking to myself, it's like, guys, you guys are fighting over a pie that's so small.
Right.
Instead, just work on making it bigger. You know what I mean? Like, work together to make the interest in the sport bigger.
Yeah.
When Metamoris was like trying to initially contract me, you know, they're like, you know, they wanted me to just sign with them exclusively and just work with them. And I'm just like, guys, I literally was just like, that's dumb. Like, it's a poor decision for me and you. It doesn't make sense. You guys are trying to create a monopoly over something that's so small when all these other organizations that you look at as enemies are really helping you out because they're broadening the horizons for the sport. And I feel like the same thing is true for mixed martial arts, man. You know, if the UFC was the only thing that existed, there are certain people that wouldn't watch it. You know, like you need these other circuit shows, you know, in other countries and stuff like that to build the sport. Like what one has been able to do in Asia, the UFC has never been able to do in Asia.
Yeah.
Like their shows, it's not even a contest.
Yeah.
No.
You know, if it wasn't for one, there'd be so many of these people that are now interested in watching mixed martial arts that probably do now tune into some UFCs that would never have watched before. You know, and it's so close-minded, I think, for them to just, yes, it is your business competition, but I think it's a closed-minded view to think of them as just like the enemy and not as somebody to work with, you know, to grow the sport, in my opinion. And, you know, I just think it's too early to just try to divide up that pie. You know what I mean?
And just to go further, what's cool about it is, Garry, I've seen you at Men of War in New Jersey, cornering your people. Like you come out to regional shows. You're there to support your fighters, and I agree. I mean, you see a lot. You've been there for the MMA shows. We've seen the guys from the UFC, big names. You guys come out and you support everything. So I definitely agree with that. And if you look at a schedule in a whole, you're like Saturday, holy shit, there's 10 MMA shows and 4 jiu-jitsu shows all on the same day.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, man. To grow anything, you might the people that are going to go to show A, they're going to go to show A whether it's on the same day or a different day. It's not going to matter. You know, so I agree. The sport should be grown, but everything's like that, even in the media.
Absolutely.
We work with other sites. Like, are they our competition at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. But we've had other media people on our show. We'll go to their show. Why? Because everybody wins.
Yeah.
Yep.
So maybe that's a New Jersey thing. We have that good attitude. That's what that is.
Yes. I think it's probably rare for somebody from New Jersey to have that attitude.
So are we the outcasts of the state?
Of New Jersey. I don't know if working together is like a great strong suit of the New Jersey tribe, if you will.
He's right, bro. If you live here your whole life, or just a good portion of it,
that's funny.
You would understand. Don't knock my state when we get off, though, Josh. I'm telling you now.
I won't, man. I won't. At least not to your face. I'll knock it later. I'm just kidding.
I say to anybody that travels there is just when you land in Newark, just close your eyes until you leave Newark Airport, and you'll be good. Then that's the problem, right? Is they land in Newark and they're like, "Oh man, this is a shithole." You know? The issue is that's our welcome to New Jersey. Yeah. Here's Newark, one of the top 10 murder capitals of the United States.
So what they really need is an airport in Princeton. If you land in Princeton, then it's all good. We rectified a problem.
Yeah.
So, Gary, who do you watch, man? When when you hear a name, a fight announced, and you're like, holy shit! Like you have to drop what you're doing. I know where I'm going to be. When that fight is, whether it's UFC, Bellator, Jiu-Jitsu, whatever. Like, who's somebody that you are glued when they come on?
Yeah, so I have a bunch of guys that I research. A lot of times it's funny because you come from two different perspectives when you're watching MMA. Like, there's a perspective of like entertainment where you're watching, you're having a good time, and you're like, oh, exciting fight, not exciting fight, whatever. Yeah. But as you start to get involved in the sport professionally, like every time I watch a fight, it's hard for me to not watch it from like a standpoint of what can I take from this fight to get better, right? So what tends to happen is that the fights that I pay attention to the most are like the guys who I think I can learn the most from or have the qualities of which I want or something like that. More so than like necessarily that the guy is a super exciting fighter or anything like that. It's like I'm always coming from like that perspective of learning. But many of them are still exciting too. I would say Damian Maia is like a big one just because he's been able to use jiu-jitsu to effectively, dominate in mixed martial arts. I don't think he got as much credit as he should have. He's just one of those guys. It's like a super quiet guy, just kind of, didn't really. I don't think he really knew how to leverage, his success. Let's put it that way.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas, a guy like Conor McGregor or who else am I thinking of? Like Chael Sonnen, like they'll take that success. If the success was an orange and just squeeze the shit out of that thing. Yeah. Nothing left. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they know how to do that. They know how to promote something. And I think that's like the big trouble with a guy like that. But anyway, just to name a few names, Damian Maia is a big one. Rousimar Palhares was huge back when he was like fighting in bigger shows and stuff. Now he kind of just gets work wherever he can because their whole holding submissions after people tap sort of thing. He was a big one to watch. When I was doing a lot of leg lock research, I watched a lot of Marcin Held and Imanari, and obviously I ended up competing against those guys too. I like trying to think. Max Holloway is actually really interesting to watch. Great striker. There's just different things from different guys. They all have different qualities, like things that I'm looking to pick up. So yeah, I mean, to some that I'm like obviously biased towards, like GSP. Like I train with him, so anytime, obviously he doesn't fight as much anymore, but anytime that he does, I'm obviously like super interested in it. I research all his stuff. Yeah. Frankie, I used to work with a lot back when we used to train at Ricardo's, so I'm always interested to watch Frankie Edgar's fights too. So. A little bit of, and that's more on the, like, the team side of things too. So like anybody from our team, I'm always interested in watching. But yeah, man, just to name a few. Basically, like anybody who has, Khabib's fights too are really interesting because even though he might not use quote unquote per se, like, I don't know, I guess jiu-jitsu, well, he does, but to a different degree, he does things differently that are really successful at the highest level, but he uses a lot of grappling. Grappling is the blanket term that I would use. So anybody that is their strong suit is grappling, I'm always paying a little bit more attention to those guys because that's my strong suit too. So I probably have the most. I can learn a lot from those guys because they're taking what I'm good at and making it effective in mixed martial arts.
What's kind of wild is that if you look at all, I'm just using the UFC for example, out of all their champions, I think all of them with the exception of 2, their base is grappling.
Yeah.
It's just the way to go. It seems to be.
You know what? I'd be curious to kind of pick your brain. Speaking of Khabib, he likes to utilize like that low leg mount, right? Like he likes to mount real low. And how would you combat that? Because it seems like a lot of people, it's different because not a lot of people do that. In fact, I can probably only think of a couple people that's even really done that. How would you combat that if that was you?
He actually does a little bit more than just that. It's a really interesting tactic. Yeah. So when and he does different things, so don't get me wrong, but this is one of the main ones that I see is when he does that, whatever side you happen to be posting towards. So if you're leaning on your right arm, for instance, he's going to sweep your legs towards your right arm. So now what ends up happening is the hand that you were previously using for base is no longer supporting your weight. You have to switch hands. And during that hand switch, he comes behind the back, grabs your wrist, puts your shoulder on the mat. So the big thing that I would say, though, overall, to combat a style like Khabib's, or really just I think it's one of the best things you can do on the fence, is just cover the head. The biggest problem when you're pinned up against the fence, you want to get up. And most of the time when you want to get up, like let's say I was in the open or something like that, you'd think about getting underhooks.
Yeah.
And it makes sense in the open. You go to get an underhook, you off balance a guy, you can get back to your feet, maybe you move to a body lock or a single or something like that. But the problem is against the fence, when you get underhooks, you put someone's head above your head. Like just inherently based off of that position, by putting your hands there, you're taking their head and putting it above your head. And when you do that, you keep yourself down because now you're pinned up against the fence and you allow them to hit you. When their head's above your head, when you're against the fence, that's when you're getting hit. Okay? Right. If you can keep someone's head below your head, the amount of damage that they're able to cause when you're against the fence is far more minimal. Okay? So if you're asking me what I would do in that situation, and of course, I'm not pretending like tomorrow if I had a fight with Khabib, I'd kick his ass. Don't anybody interpret it's the wrong way.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that thinking about it from what I understand about mixed martial arts right now, my main concern anytime he had me against the fence would be covering his head at all times. The moment his head comes up above my head, he's hitting me in the face. Whenever his head's below, I may not be able to get up right away, because what people are afraid of when they cover the head is they're afraid of pulling a person onto their body, right? If I cover your head, I'm gluing you to my hips and legs.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm not getting punched in the face. So it's a give and take. It does make it to some degree harder, but at the same time, every time that person fights to get their head above yours, they're helping lift you up because your arm's over their head, right?
Right.
So that lifts your body, and then it makes it easier for you to get up. The one downside to that method is that it offers a little bit of back exposure. So that can be a potential problem. But anyway, sorry, I might be getting a little too technical here.
No, we actually... It's not often you get some, you know what I mean? Like, like everybody knows what Khabib's going to do.
Yeah.
Sure.
27 guys knew what he was going to do, and 27 guys couldn't stop him. Sure. But with your background, your grappling background is quite high level. I mean, it doesn't get much better, so you're the correct guy to ask.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like, if Khabib's coming after me, you know how I stop it? I'm going to jump over the cage and run my ass right out the arena. That's it.
Smart move.
That's it. I'm legging him out, or trying to anyway.
Yeah.
But it's always good to have a real technical point of view from somebody, because I could have said all that stuff, but it wouldn't mean shit coming from me.
Sure. And I know. I can hear the shitstorm already, though, from this. Like, somebody's going to be, oh, yeah, he thinks he can beat Khabib against the wall. What does he know? But it doesn't matter. Whatever.
No, it's just your expertise, man. I don't think anybody. I mean, you might have a couple idiots, but it's your expertise. You are, for all intents and purposes, you're an expert, right? You're an expert in that field. You know, I think it's no, I don't think it's. You're not saying like you said. You're. It's not like you're gonna go and whip Khabib's ass tomorrow. That's not what you're saying. You're just talking about a what if scenario. Hypothetically, this is what I would do. That's all. You know. Talk about you brought up your gym a little bit. Give a shout out to your gym, man. So it's was it Brunswick BJJ, right? You're the head instructor there.
Yeah, Brunswick Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I teach most of the classes. I'm not in there tonight. Obviously, I'm doing this interview with you guys. I got like one of my assistants going in there and teaching. But I teach most of the classes, I would say, overall. It's just whenever I go to travel to coach somebody or teach a seminar or something, you know, I might not be there for a weekend or maybe for a holiday to see my family or something. But for the most part, I teach all the classes. I started doing a little bit of MMA stuff there too, now that I'm obviously involved in that. So, you know, it's a great place to be. I really enjoy teaching. You know, honestly, I think most people that are in my situation, it's a little overwhelming to do as much stuff as I do. You know, training all day, go drive to the city, train all day in the city, come back home, teach all my classes, go to bed, wake up, do it all over again every day. But for me, like it's what I love, man. And, you know, it's a little bit exhausting. I'm thinking about like moving a little bit closer to the city so the commute's not as bad. But, you know, ultimately, man, I really enjoy that. And you know, teaching for me is a long-term plan. You know, fighting for me is short-term. I don't. If I'm fighting if I'm fighting past 35, I think I screwed up. Honestly, you know, not to say that I won't take some sort of super fight or something when I'm older. You know, if it's something appealing and it makes sense, and you know, I think it's going to be good, that's one thing. But if I feel like I need to fight when I'm 35 or over, I think I screwed up, man. Like I think it's just too long to just like take damage to my head and my body and everything. I think at that point, you know, maybe I'll compete a little bit in jiu-jitsu still. I don't know, who knows. But I'd like to be, you know, retired from actually fighting by then for the most part, you know, unless it's like some super fight deals or whatever. But the long-term goal for me is to be a teacher, man. You know, that's what I'm going to do. Regardless of how lucrative, whatever it is that I end up doing, you know, I run an apparel company. I'm going to have gyms for sure, more of them. I'm fighting, you know, competed in jiu-jitsu professionally. Regardless of my whatever my success level is, I can't see a situation where in my life I'm not going to be teaching. I just don't. I don't know. I just don't see it. You know,
that's a good situation to be in. To know what you want to do, and you're already doing it, so you get to just kind of spread the knowledge later on.
Yeah, it's a little bit of like. You know, I get to do some experiments now, you know, because I obviously can't commit my full time to teaching because I have to compete and I have to train and all that stuff. So I do my best, but I can't like, you know, just study tape all day like John does for, you know, to improve on, you know, the gi and no gi and judo and wrestling and all these different things that it would take to be a really great teacher. And I do a decent job, I think, because I'm obviously involved in the sport and I'm involved in MMA, but I think one day I'll be even better. But it's fun because I get to play around with you know, different teaching styles, and I get to take the stuff that I just learned and try to communicate that to other people. I think it's one of the cooler things is like, you know, it's one thing to have a skill, and it's another thing to be able to take that skill and to communicate it to other people and actually have them able to do the same thing that you did. You know, because if you can do that, that means the skill's not lost. Otherwise, the skill's lost with you. I mean, you'll be like, you know, it's like a shooting star. It's there and then it's gone. You know, if you can communicate skills to other people, it carries on to other generations. And that, to me, that gives me a better sense of fulfillment than just like, I don't know, even if I like end up at the end of my career becoming like UFC champion multiple time, whatever, blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, like it's just going to be a blip on the radar. You know, 100 years from now, people are going to be like, yeah, that guy was pretty good. And they'll watch some fights or whatever. But, you know, but the stuff that I teach people like will be around forever, you know, whether they realize it was me or not.
Right.
Hey man, so where can people get in touch with you? Your social media? What do you use to communicate with the fans?
Man, I'm pretty like on social media hard, man. Like I wreck Twitter. I'm not as good.
I've seen your Twitter. You do wreck it pretty good. I've seen it. I would say I'm the most creative perhaps there with my different posts and things, but
But you know, my Instagram is probably my biggest form of social media. That's the most successful.
Okay.
And then you know, a little bit on Facebook here and there. But lately, Facebook has just been very difficult to use, like especially as a professional page. I don't know if anybody else out there is trying to use like Facebook for business and stuff, but man, like the Facebook Pages app is garbage. It's just so annoying to deal with, and it's just so glitchy. I don't know, man. Yeah. I try to use it when I can, and like I obviously use my personal page a little bit, but anyway, I would say that's, you know, between Twitter and Instagram, you can reach me, and like I pretty much respond to everybody. Like I even try to go through like my, you know, my messages of people that like I'm not following or whatever, and you know, answer some of those and stuff. If you say something that, if you have an interesting question that I think, you know, deserves an answer, or you say something funny or something like that, more than likely I'll entertain you. Or you just talk massive amounts of shit to me, I'll probably talk shit back, you know. So I'm pretty, I'd say more so than most, you know, athletes or, you know, I don't know, what you want, influencer, whatever you want to label a person that's on social media. I would say I'm more active when it comes to communicating with fans and people in general than other
plus
people.
You're out in the public. Like I said, you're an accessible guy. Yeah. You weren't hiding behind people ushering you to the match. You walked through. I remember because you had a Hawaii backpack on. I remember the backpack going by me. And I'm like, wait a minute, I know that guy. Yeah, it's very cool. We'll definitely tag your social media. We follow your Twitter because it's hysterical. At times you say some super funny stuff, so we definitely follow it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah, man, so, you know, please go give him a follow. Go give him a shout-out. Ask him a question. Just don't ask him nothing too stupid. But go give him a shout-out, guys. And, you know, we don't want to hold you up too much, man. Like I said, it was our absolute pleasure to have you on. We appreciate your time, sir. And for Garry Tonon, for Nick Portella, for Josh Furs, that's the Lion Killer. And we're Combat Insiders, and we're out. Boom.